While the world watches Hormuz, another strait quietly holds the future of global power. For over 1,000 years, this strait has been the most valuable waterway on Earth. Control of Malacca once meant control of the entire spice and silk trade. Portuguese, Dutch, and British empires fought bloody wars to own this passage. Today, the stakes are even higher. 40% of global trade and 80% of China's oil pass through here. China calls this vulnerability the Malacca Dilemma. In 2003, President Hu Jintao warned that a hostile power could choke China's economy in days.
The narrator delivers with calm authority and rising strategic urgency, blending deep historical insight with the tension of today's superpower rivalry.
The United States and its allies have the power to close it almost instantly. In early 2026, the US-Indonesia Defense Pact made that threat very real. China is now racing to build alternative routes and naval bases.
But none of them can replace Malacca's speed and capacity.
As clear value research shows, this is the choke point that truly decides the next century. The Malacca Dilemma is no longer just a Chinese problem. It is a global one. The story begins long before China or the United States existed.
If you want to understand the next major flashpoint after Hormuz, the deep research at Clear Value connects.
Portuguese forces captured Malacca in 1511 and turned it into a fortress. The Dutch and British later fought for the same prize. Whoever controlled Malacca controlled the flow of wealth between Europe and Asia. After World War II, the strait became the highway for Asia's economic miracle. Japan, South Korea, and China built their entire export economies around this route. Today, more than 60,000 vessels pass through every year.
That is roughly one ship every 8 minutes, day and night.
China's dependence is the most extreme. 80% of its oil must come this way. The narrator delivers with calm authority and rising strategic urgency, blending deep historical insight with the tension of today's superpower rivalry. This is exactly what the Malacca Dilemma is all about.
In a conflict, the United States and its allies could shut it down within hours.
China has been preparing for this scenario for over 20 years. The 2026 US-Indonesia Defense Pact made the nightmare suddenly much closer. Indonesia sits right on the southern edge of this critical choke point. A stronger US-Indonesia alliance directly threatens China's lifeline. China is responding with increased naval patrols and new infrastructure. But building alternatives takes decades and costs hundreds of billions. Meanwhile, the strait remains the fastest and cheapest route. Any closure would cause immediate global supply chain chaos. Electronics, clothing, pharmaceuticals, and energy would all be hit hard. The Malacca Dilemma is now one of the most dangerous flashpoints on the planet. Both sides are preparing for the possibility of conflict here. The next major global crisis may not start in the Middle East. It may begin right here in this narrow tropical passage. The team at Clear Value spent weeks mapping every layer of this story, so China is investing heavily in the Belt and Road Initiative to reduce its vulnerability. But these routes are slower, more expensive, and still vulnerable. Naval expansion in the South China Sea is another part of the strategy. The United States is strengthening alliances all along the strait. The 2026 Defense Pact with Indonesia was a major strategic move. Singapore, sitting at the southern end, remains the world's busiest transshipment port. Any conflict here would paralyze global supply chains within days. The Malacca Dilemma is now a central part of US-China strategic competition.
Both sides know the first shots in a future conflict may be fired here.
The world has never been more dependent on this single narrow passage. History shows that choke points eventually become flashpoints.
Malacca may be the ultimate test of 21st century power.
The question is no longer if tension will rise here.
It is when and how the world will respond.
If these deep strategic stories help you understand the forces shaping our world, subscribe to Clear Value.
The Malacca Dilemma is one of the most important stories of our time. It shows how geography still dictates the fate of great powers.
China is determined never to be held hostage again.
The United States is equally determined to maintain its advantage.
The narrow waters of Malacca have seen empires rise and fall.
The narrow waters of Malacca have seen empires rise and fall.
They may soon witness the next great test of power.
The world is watching closely.
Because whoever controls Malacca controls the future.
The Malacca Dilemma is not coming. It is already here.
How the world navigates this choke point will shape the rest of the century.
History has taught us that narrow straits create big conflicts.
The Malacca Dilemma may be the ultimate test of our time. And the next chapter is being written right now in these narrow waters.